Just after midnight on January 1st, 2011, the narrow streets of Caloocan City, Philippines, vanish beneath a thick canopy of white smoke. Deafening firecrackers echo against the concrete walls of densely packed houses, masking all other sound in a chaotic celebration of the new year. Reynaldo Dasa, a local neighborhood councilman, stands on the pavement outside his front door. He raises a small digital camera to his eye. Through the viewfinder, he frames a festive portrait of his wife, his young daughter, and his mother-in-law standing against the family vehicle. He presses the shutter button. At the exact millisecond, a blinding flash illuminates the darkness. A figure steps from behind a parked car just a few feet away. The digital sensor captures a man wearing a baseball cap, his arms raised, aiming a .45 caliber pistol directly at the lens. The deafening crack of a gunshot cuts through the holiday noise. A projectile passes through the councilman's arm and enters his chest. The camera falls to the asphalt as Reynaldo collapses in front of his screaming family. That single, frozen frame becomes one of the most chilling pieces of evidence in the history of forensic science. Metro Manila operates as a sprawling, hyperdense metropolis where millions of lives intersect in incredibly close quarters. Within this massive urban grid lies Caloocan City, and deep inside its borders sits Barangay 35. A barangay functions as the smallest administrative division in the Philippines, acting as a micro-community where neighbors live shoulder to shoulder in homes separated only by inches of cinder block and peeling paint. Sodium streetlights cast long shadows over the narrow alleyways, illuminating a labyrinth of corrugated metal roofs and hanging laundry lines. In this tightly knit neighborhood, anonymity does not exist. Everyone knows their neighbors, their schedules, and their secrets. Reynaldo Dasa called this vibrant, chaotic enclave his home. At 35 years old, he anchored his life around his wife, Arlen, and their children, sharing a modest residence that served as a central hub for their extended family. The Dasa household maintained a steady rhythm of morning breakfasts, school runs, and community gatherings. Reynaldo found immense pride in providing for his loved ones, constantly striving to build a secure future for his young daughter. He believed in order and community welfare, a conviction that drove him to take on a highly visible leadership role. Reynaldo served as a local councilman, a position known locally as a god. He viewed this role not as a political stepping stone, but as a solemn duty to protect his immediate surroundings. As an active member of the Barangay Peacekeeping Action Team, he essentially functioned as the neighborhood's first line of defense against local criminal syndicates. His daily routine involved patrolling the tangled web of streets, mediating neighborly disputes, and aggressively dismantling local gang operations. The geography of Barangay 35 meant that Reynaldo lived side by side with the very lawbreakers he worked to apprehend. He walked the same cracked pavements as local gang members passing their homes every single day. This proximity created a heavy psychological burden for the young father. Reynaldo refused to turn a blind eye to the extortion and theft plaguing his community, initiating strict enforcement operations despite the obvious risks. His rigid application of the law earned him deep respect among the law-abiding residents. However, this unwavering stance placed a permanent target on his back. Recognizing the danger, Reynaldo acquired a .45 caliber pistol for personal protection. He kept the weapon close, acutely aware that retaliation could arrive at his front door at any given moment. The final weeks of the year 2010 brought an escalation of unspoken tension to the streets of Barangay 35. Reynaldo had recently orchestrated a series of arrests targeting the Passaway Gang, a local network notorious for street-level crime. The gang members viewed the councilman as a direct threat to their livelihood and their freedom. Despite the lingering animosity, Reynaldo remained focused on his family and the approaching holidays. The physical layout of their home placed their front gate directly on a busy residential street, offering very little buffer between their private sanctuary and the public thoroughfare. As December transitioned into the final day of the year, the neighborhood erupted into traditional festivities. Families spilled out of their doorways, filling the humid night air with the smell of roasting meat and sulfur. Reynaldo chose to leave his personal firearm inside the house that evening. He prioritized a peaceful celebration, refusing to let the shadows of his peacekeeping job darken his family's joy. He stepped onto the crowded street with a digital camera, eager to document the transition into a new chapter. He wanted nothing more than a simple photograph of the people he loved most. He had no idea that a predator was already waiting in the darkness, utilizing the festive geography of the neighborhood to set a fatal trap. The transition from a joyous holiday celebration to sheer horror occurs in a fraction of a second. Reynaldo absorbs a devastating impact to his chest and falls backward onto the concrete. The continuous explosions of holiday firecrackers completely swallow the sound of the lethal gunshot, leaving the surrounding crowd oblivious to the tragedy unfolding on the pavement. Arlene and her mother watch in absolute shock as the councilman begins losing consciousness right in front of them. The shooter retreats into the shadows, melting into the dense crowd and the thick, suffocating blanket of white sulfur smoke. Panic overtakes the Deza family as they scramble to lift Reynaldo from the ground. They drag his fading body into their vehicle, desperately navigating through the congested, smoke-filled streets of Caloocan City. The frantic drive to Martinez Memorial Hospital feels agonizingly slow against the backdrop of the New Year revelry. Medical personnel rush the 35-year-old father into the emergency ward, initiating immediate life-saving protocols. Despite their urgent efforts, the damage to his vital organs proves catastrophic. Doctors pronounce Reynaldo Deza deceased in the early hours of January 1, 2011. The vibrant civic leader meets a sudden permanent end, leaving his family shattered in the sterile halls of the hospital. Detectives from the Caloocan City Police Department receive the urgent dispatch and arrive at the chaotic scene in Barangay 35. The spatial reality of the location immediately presents a monumental forensic challenge. The street is littered with discarded firework casings, trampled food containers, and the debris of hundreds of celebrating residents. Thick smog still hangs in the air, obscuring the glow of the sodium streetlights and coating potential evidence in a layer of ash. Investigators establish a perimeter, taping off the exact section of pavement where the councilman fell. They fan out across the neighborhood, knocking on doors and searching for anyone who might have witnessed the approach of the assailant. The environmental factors of the night work entirely in the predator's favor. The relentless noise of the fireworks completely masked the discharge of the .45 caliber weapon, meaning most neighbors did not even realize a crime had occurred until the police arrived. The thick smoke and the disorienting flashes of light provided perfect visual cover for the perpetrator to escape unseen. Detectives face a terrifying lack of eyewitnesses, staring down a seemingly impossible investigation. The trail threatens to go cold within hours of the crime, as the sprawling city swallows the unknown attacker. As the grim reality of the situation settles over the investigation, grieving family members return to the heavily guarded perimeter outside their home. In the midst of their profound shock, Arlene remembers the digital camera that her husband had been holding just before he collapsed. The device had fallen to the asphalt during the chaos and was subsequently recovered from the street by relatives. Hoping to preserve the final moments of Reynaldo's life, the family hands the digital camera over to the lead investigators. Detectives transport the device back to the Caloocan Police Precinct, treating it as a standard piece of personal property rather than a critical piece of evidence. A forensic technician powers on the camera and begins scrolling through the saved files. They pass by several standard holiday pictures before opening the very last image recorded on the memory card. The investigators stare at the glowing monitor in absolute disbelief. The final file is a crystal clear, focused photograph of the Desa family smiling. Just behind their shoulders, immortalized in the blinding burst of the camera flash, stands the assassin. The image captures the perpetrator with his weapon raised and a secondary figure lurking in the shadows. Reynaldo Dasa had unwittingly documented the exact face of his killer, handing law enforcement an irrefutable roadmap to justice. Inside the precinct, the digital photograph dominates the glowing monitors of the main investigation room. Forensic technicians extract the raw image file from the recovered memory card, utilizing specialized software to preserve the fragile digital metadata. They isolate the exchangeable image file format data, retrieving the exact timestamp, shutter speed, and aperture settings recorded by the device. The internal clock on the camera registers the moment of capture at a fraction of a second past midnight on January 1st, 2011. Technicians magnify the background pixels to dissect the final moment of the councilman's life with mathematical precision. The spatial mapping within the frame paints a picture of absolute terrifying calculation. In the foreground, Arlene. Her mother and her daughter stand shoulder to shoulder, their faces illuminated by the bright burst of the xenon flash, just over their right shoulders separated by mere inches and the trunk of a parked vehicle. The predator steps into the harsh light. The high-resolution image captures a man in a dark jacket and a baseball cap worn backward. His facial features exposed to the lens, his arms lock forward in a rigid practiced firing stance, holding the .45 caliber weapon toward the center of the frame. Because the speed of light outpaces the speed of a fired projectile, Reynaldo captured the visual evidence of the attack before the fatal strike reached his body. The victim himself froze his assassin in time, providing law enforcement with an irrefutable pixel-perfect roadmap to his killers. The investigative team brings in firearms experts to analyze the mechanical details visible in the frozen frame. The zoomed-in image reveals the distinct profile of a 1911-style .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol. The digital sensor records a faint streak of distortion at the muzzle, capturing the ignition of the gunpowder and the initial expansion of hot gases. Ballistics specialists note the position of the slide, analyzing the recoil mechanics captured in the millisecond of the flash. This visual data confirms the weapon type, matching the caliber of the spent casing later recovered from the asphalt on the crime scene. Investigators stare at the monitor, realizing they possess a piece of evidence unprecedented in modern detective work. They no longer need to rely on the hazy, traumatized memories of bystanders fleeing through the thick sulfur smoke. The photograph acts as a pristine, uncontaminated witness. Detectives print dozens of high-definition color copies of the assassin's face, preparing to take the evidence back to the streets. They establish a dedicated command post at the Caloocan City Police Headquarters to coordinate the incoming intelligence. Task force leaders construct a massive timeline board, pinning the printed photograph to the center of the wall. The haunting image of the killer aiming his weapon at the camera lens sets a grim, urgent tone for the entire precinct. The hunt for the phantom shooter transforms into a tangible, targeted operation. The pristine clarity of the digital photograph stands in stark contrast to the physical reality of the crime scene left behind in Barrage 35. When forensic teams attempt to process the stretch of asphalt where the councilman fell, they encounter an impossible environment. Thousands of detonated firecrackers coat the entire street in a thick layer of burnt paper, sulfur, and chemical residue. This blanket of holiday debris contaminates the area, destroying any chance of recovering usable footprint impressions left by the fleeing suspects. The intense smell of the sulfur nullifies the deployment of tracking units, preventing police dogs from locking onto a scent trail. Furthermore, the chaotic stamp of panicked neighbors rushing to aid the victim trampled any microscopic evidence present on the pavement. Investigators search for the discharged casing from the .45 caliber weapon, but the sheer volume of explosive shrapnel masking the ground turns the search into a grueling ordeal. Officers spend hours sifting through the grime on their hands and knees before locating the single brass casing kicked into a gutter. The environmental destruction of the physical crime scene renders traditional forensic collection methods useless. The chaotic environment shielded the predator's escape, highlighting the calculated nature of the New Year's Eve ambush. Without the victim's digital camera, the Caloocan City Police Department would possess zero physical leads to pursue. The photograph acts as the sole anchor tethering the investigation to reality, forcing the detectives to rely on visual identification rather than physical trace evidence. Armed with the undeniable visual record, Caloocan police launch a targeted identification sweep. Detectives returned to the cramped winding alleys of Barrage 35 holding the printed photographs. They understand the dense geography of the neighborhood dictates that someone must recognize the man in the baseball cap. Investigators bypass general public appeals and approach their localized network of confidential informants. The strategy yields immediate results. Multiple neighborhood sources look at the printed photograph and identify the primary shooter as Arnel Bunaflor. The informants draw the detectives' attention to a secondary figure lurking deeper in the shadows of the image. Just behind Bunaflor, obscured by the darkness, stands a lookout monitoring the street. Investigators identify this second man as Michael Rollon. Intelligence gathering within the community implicates a third accomplice, Frederick Sales, who helped coordinate the ambush from the periphery. Detectives secure the names of two additional conspirators, Romulo Lauda and Francis Bronjal, who participated in the planning stages of the attack. A chilling psychological reality descends upon the Dasa family as they learn the identities of the suspects. The men responsible for the destruction of their family lived right down the street, hiding in plain sight among the very community the councilman swore to protect. With the suspects identified, investigators dig into the criminal archives to establish the motive behind the brazen attack. Background checks reveal that Arnel Bunaflor operates as an active high-ranking enforcer for the Passaway gang. This criminal syndicate maintained a lucrative grip on local extortion and theft rings until Reynaldo Dasa began his aggressive neighborhood patrols. The paper trail exposes a massive systemic failure within the local justice system. Months prior to the new year, Reynaldo orchestrated a sting operation resulting in Bunaflor's arrest on felony robbery charges. However, rigid protocols and legal loopholes regarding pre-trial detention allowed a local judge to grant Bunaflor release on bail. The court system placed a known violent gang member back onto the exact same streets as his arresting officer. The flawed bail protocol provided zero buffer or protection for the civic leader, prioritizing administrative efficiency over community safety. Free from custody, Bunaflor harbored a deep, festering resentment toward Reynaldo, viewing the councilman as a primary obstacle to the gang's illicit operations. Detectives execute a search warrant on a known gang hideout, securing discarded cellular devices left behind by the fleeing suspects. A forensic extraction of the digital subscriber identity module uncovers a series of text messages discussing monetary payouts and coordinated surveillance. The communications indicate the Passaway gang pooled their resources and issued a paid hit on the councilman. The local justice system's failure to keep a violent offender behind bars provided the syndicate with a perfect motivated triggerman. Believing the suspects remain hidden nearby, tactical units prepare a massive sweep of the Caloocan City area. Armed officers breach the known residences of Arnel Bunaflor, Michael Rollon, and Frederick Sales, expecting a violent confrontation. They clear the structures room by room, finding nothing but scattered clothing and open windows. The perpetrators utilize the chaotic aftermath of the holiday celebrations to flee the immediate jurisdiction. This marks a frustrating dead end for the investigative team. The sprawling, interconnected geography of Metro Manila acts as an impenetrable concrete jungle, offering tens of thousands of boarding houses and unregistered slum dwellings for fugitives to exploit. Detectives set up a localized dragnet, monitoring bus terminals, train stations, and exit points along the city limits. Days ticked by with zero confirmed sightings of Bunaflor or his accomplices. The lack of forward momentum takes a heavy psychological toll on the Morning Dasa family. Arlen and her children face the agonizing task of planning a funeral under the constant threat of gang retaliation. The police department stations armed guards around the family home, securing the perimeter as relatives gather to pay their respects. The family must navigate their grief trapped in a state of hypervigilance. Terrified the men who destroyed their lives might return. The investigators recognize standard street-level patrols will not flush out a disciplined gang enforcer. Before the telecommunications analysis yields a definitive location, investigators turn up the pressure on the remaining street-level members of the Passaway gang. Detectives execute synchronized raids on known neighborhood gambling dens and safe houses, dragging several low-ranking gang associates into the precinct for questioning. The interrogation strategy revolves around the psychological weight of the victim's final photograph. Investigators place the high-definition printed image on the metal tables in front of the detained associates. They inform the suspects that the entire nation has seen the faces of the killers, making anyone caught shielding them an accessory to a high-profile assassination. The irrefutability of the digital evidence shatters the standard code of silence maintained by the syndicate. The low-level enforcers realize the police presents an airtight case against Bunaflor and refuse to face prison time for his actions. Sweating under the intense fluorescent lights of the interrogation rooms, multiple associates begin offering fragments of intelligence to save themselves. They confirm the organizational hierarchy of the gang, detailing how Bunaflor accepted the contract to eliminate the councilman. The suspects describe the chilling premeditation of the ambush, explaining how Bunaflor stalked the Dasa household for days leading up to the holiday. This corroborated testimony transforms the investigation from a simple identification case into a sprawling conspiracy probe. The detectives document every statement, building a bulletproof legal foundation for the inevitable trial while waiting for the digital tracking team to pinpoint the primary target. Refusing to let the trail go cold, the lead detectives transition their focus from physical searches to deep communications analysis. If Bunaflor fled the immediate boundaries of Metro Manila, he requires financial support and logistical shelter from his remaining gang associates. Investigators begin mapping the extended familial roots of the Passaway gang, drawing connections to rural provinces outside the city limits. They secure judicial subpoenas, compelling the major telecommunications companies to release the active call logs associated with Bunaflor's known girlfriend. Analysts cross-reference phone records, tracking the pings of cellular towers to monitor her digital movements. This painstaking process requires law enforcement to sift through thousands of lines of data, searching for a single geographic anomaly. The strategy demands immense patience, forcing the detectives to endure empty days of waiting while analyzing incoming signal logs. Eventually, the digital surveillance flags a pattern of communication originating from a distant, unfamiliar cell tower. The signal traced back to a remote sector outside the sprawling urban density, pointing toward the northern regions of the country. Detectives isolate the tower data, narrowing the transmission radius down to a specific rural municipality. The cell tower pings confirm the girlfriend has traveled far beyond the reach of the Caloocan City Police Department. The investigative team prepares to expand their operational net across provincial borders. The investigation shifts its entire geographic focus 170 miles north of the original crime scene. The new intelligence directs the authorities to the province of Isabela, targeting a quiet rural town named Aurora. The environmental contrast between the cramped, smog-filled alleys of Barrage 35 and the open agricultural plains of Isabela is massive. Detectives dispatch plainclothes undercover officers to the town of Aurora to interface with local informants. These quiet, methodical inquiries bypass the gang's inner circle, targeting peripheral residents who possess no loyalty to Buna Flor through sustained pressure and the promise of a monetary reward. A crucial local informant breaks their silence. The informant provides law enforcement with a specific address, confirming that Bonaflor and his girlfriend have rented a room in an unassuming boarding house. Bonaflor utilizes the extreme isolation of the province to hide from the immense media attention generated by the viral photograph. The physical distance presents a severe logistical challenge for the Caloocan detectives. They cannot execute a warrant outside their jurisdiction without coordinating a joint task force with the regional authorities. The lead investigators initiate secure communications with the Isabela Provincial Police, sharing the case files and the irrefutable photographic evidence. The combined intelligence network leaves the gang enforcer with nowhere left to run. The authorities treat the upcoming operation with extreme caution, operating under the assumption that Bonaflor remains in possession of the lethal weapon used in the attack. The Joint Task Force establishes a staging area on the outskirts of Aurora, far away from the sightlines of the boarding house. Tactical teams spend hours reviewing the structural blueprints of the rural property, ensuring they can breach the perimeter without triggering a standoff. They map the specific layout of the target building, analyzing the entry points, the surrounding dirt roads, and the potential escape routes into the surrounding fields. Snipers identify elevated vantage points, while entry teams rehearse the stacking formations required to secure the narrow hallways of the boarding house. The commanding officers drill the units on strict engagement protocols, prioritizing a swift, overwhelming breach to prevent the suspect from reaching a firearm. Law enforcement units synchronize their watches, timing the raid for an hour when the suspects are most likely asleep. Detectives review the extracted text messages one final time, cementing their resolve. The pieces of the massive manhunt align, transforming a localized murder investigation into a multi-agency provincial strike. The Dasa family's tragic photograph provided the initial spark, and precise, methodical detective work fueled the pursuit across the country. The trap is set in the quiet rural darkness. Law enforcement units prepare to move into position, ready to bring the terrifying hunt for the councilman's killer to a definitive close. The rural municipality of Aurora rests in total silence as the Joint Task Force initiates the final phase of the manhunt. A thick blanket of provincial darkness obscures the single-story concrete boarding house situated at the end of a long, unpaved dirt road. Heavily equipped law enforcement units move into position, their heavy tactical boots making absolutely no sound against the damp agricultural earth. The officers systematically surround the perimeter, sealing off every glass window and rear wooden exit to eliminate any chance of a desperate escape. Tactical commanders signal the synchronized breach, and a heavy steel battering ram shatters the front door entirely from its rusted hinges. The deafening crash of splintering wood shatters the rural quiet, catching the sleeping occupants completely off guard. Strike teams flood the narrow central hallway, sweeping their mounted weapon flashlights across the cramped, dilapidated rental rooms. They converge on the primary target door, forcing the barrier open and rushing into the dark bedroom. Arnel Bonaflor awakens to the blinding glare of high-lumen tactical lights and the dark barrels of multiple service weapons pointed directly at his chest. The overwhelming coordinated show of force completely paralyzes the arrogant gang enforcer, preventing him from reaching for any concealed weapons hidden in the room. Officers drag Bonaflor roughly from the mattress, securing his wrists in heavy steel handcuffs while detaining his terrified girlfriend in the far corner of the space. The meticulous planning and overwhelming geographical advantage result in a flawless capture without a single dangerous projectile fired into the night. The elusive fugitive who weaponized the chaos of a massive holiday celebration now finds himself completely trapped by silent, disciplined police order. Authorities transport the restrained suspect back across the sprawling expanse of the country, returning him directly to the harsh fluorescent glare of the Caloocan City Police Precinct. Detectives place Bonaflor inside a sterile, windowless interrogation room, securing his physical frame to a heavy metal chair bolted directly to the cold concrete floor. The lead investigators enter the confined space, carrying nothing but a thin manila folder and a small digital audio recorder. They completely bypass the standard preliminary questioning tactics and immediately place a high-definition color print of the New Year portrait flat on the metal table. Bonaflor stares down at his own face, permanently frozen in the blinding xenon flash of the deceased victim's camera. The irrefutable digital evidence instantly strips the predator of any potential fabricated alibi, rendering his carefully prepared lies completely useless. Confronted by the impossible reality of the photograph, the gang enforcer abandons his stubborn silence and offers a twisted, self-serving justification for the lethal attack. He claims he acted purely out of personal revenge, alleging that the councilman and his neighborhood patrol unit subjected him to severe physical violence months earlier. Investigators immediately reject this deceptive narrative, presenting the extracted cellular tech test messages that outline a coordinated, compensated contract issued by the Passaway gang. The financial records and telecommunications data expose Bonaflor not as a wronged citizen seeking justice, but as a calculated paid assassin acting strictly on syndicated orders. The intense interrogation forces the suspect to confront the absolute failure of his escape plan, trapped by the microscopic digital metadata he never even knew existed. The mask of the untouchable enforcer crumbles, revealing a desperate criminal cornered by undeniable physical proof. The finalized confession solidifies the terrifying chronological reality of the crime, exposing a predator who wore the unassuming mask of an ordinary local neighbor. For weeks leading up to the final day of the year, Bonaflor actively stalked the physical geography of Barrage 35, studying the daily routines of the Dadasa household. He walked the exact same narrow concrete alleys as the councilman, hiding in plain sight behind a veneer of mundane community life while plotting a fatal strike. The investigation reveals that Bonaflor positioned himself on the street hours before the celebration reached its peak, waiting patiently in the dark shadows of parked vehicles. He relied heavily on the dense architecture of the neighborhood and the suffocating sulfur smoke of the firecrackers to conceal his deadly intent. The assassin displayed a chilling understanding of environmental cover, utilizing the continuous deafening holiday explosions to perfectly mask the mechanical discharge of his .45 caliber weapon. He felt absolute conviction in his own criminal superiority, truly believing the chaotic environment of the city would swallow his actions and leave the authorities grasping at invisible shadows. Instead, the final millisecond of the councilman's life brought the hidden predator directly into the unforgiving light of justice. The blinding camera flash exposed the ultimate community betrayal, proving that the most lethal threats often reside right within the boundaries of a trusted neighborhood. The arrogant syndicate enforcer who believed he could easily outsmart the local justice system ultimately fell victim to a simple, joyous family portrait. The chronological timeline of the crime ends not with a clean getaway, but with the exact mechanism of the perpetrator's own absolute downfall. The definitive legal battle commences inside the sterile, wood-paneled courtrooms of the Caloocan City Regional Trial Court in the year 2012. Prosecutors construct an airtight, methodical case, anchoring their entire courtroom strategy around the historic piece of digital evidence captured by the deceased civic leader. The defense team attempts to navigate the impossible legal landscape, searching desperately for technical loopholes to suppress the viral image from the public record. They aggressively challenged the chain of custody regarding the memory card, arguing that the chaotic nature of the immediate crime scene compromised the integrity of the digital files. However, forensic technicians take the witness stand and meticulously break down the unaltered data, proving the exact timestamp aperture and shutter speed of the photograph. The prosecution brings in specialized ballistics experts who align the visible recoil mechanics in the picture with the physical brass casing recovered from the asphalt gutter. The precise spatial mapping of the printed image provides the court with an uncontaminated, objective digital witness, stripping away the typical ambiguities associated with human memory. The legal proceedings highlight a profound triumph of methodical detective work over organized criminal deception. The state presents a chronological narrative that leaves absolutely no room for reasonable doubt, cornering the defense with the stark reality of the frozen muzzle flash. The court recognizes that the victim unknowingly performed one final profound act of civic duty, providing the exact evidentiary tools necessary to dismantle his own ambush. The resulting trial sets a definitive legal precedent, showcasing exactly how undeniable visual documentation can neutralize the most calculated criminal conspiracies. The overwhelming weight of the prosecution's forensic evidence culminates in a swift and uncompromising judicial decision from the bench. The presiding